Time now for our rants and raves, starting with Dan.
I have a rave for Arthur Gregg Sulzberger, the young and still fairly new publisher of the New York Times. President Trump this week indicated that he wanted to have an off-the-record dinner with the publisher and other people at the Times. This is something that in the past I think would have been routinely agreed to. And Sulzberger sort of seized the moment, understood that those days are over, and said, "No, Mr. President, but we'd love to sit down with you and do an on-the-record interview." Trump, to his credit, agreed. Some news was made. And, the public was let into this instead of having
Sulzberger was burned last fall when Trump, they had an off-the-record, and Trump tweeted it out.
No, that's right, exactly. But keep an eye on this Sulzberger.
Yeah.
I think he's...
Listen to the Daily today if you want more details.
I want to listen to that.
All right, Jon Keller.
Okay, so getting back to Twitter and its founder, bearded troglodyte Jack Dorsey, who gave an interview to Rolling Stone, apparently, in which he was touting his philanthropy and talking about a foundation he set up and all the great work they've done. And so a curious reporter at another publication, shame on Rolling Stone for not double-checking that themselves, went online and in a matter of minutes determined that that foundation hasn't given any money to anybody. The guy is just a mammoth BS artist and fraud. And, yet again, another chapter in the ongoing exposure of our tech icons as having feet of clay, to say the least.
And Rolling Stone not checking their sources.
Yeah, that was a little sloppy.
So they went with that without...
They just ran the interview without checking the BS this guy was laying out.
That's really incredible. That's the first thing you would check, especially given some of the other stories about charitable giving in
like
recent
we've
years.
done about Trump, who said he was going to give all that money to veterans, I think it was, and then hadn't done it a year later, and everybody was all over that.
Maybe Jack Dorsey donated a painting of himself to somebody. I mean, we've seen that before.
Well, all kidding aside, people apparently figure these days they can lie with impunity. And in some cases...
I don't know where they got that idea.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I hear you.
All right, Dante.
Speaking of tech misdeeds, I actually have a rave for Josh Constine of TechCrunch. And this is a publication that concentrates on the tech world. They had a great scoop this week about Facebook essentially paying people, including teenagers, to use this app that essentially absorbed all of their data about what they were doing with their phones. And I think one of the big reporting challenges of the age is to track down what exactly the tech giants are doing, not in the course of their philanthropy, but in just how they're interacting with people and how they're gathering data, how they're buying it, how they're selling it, how they're using it, how they're deploying it. And this was just a nice example of something where a combination of good news sense and technological sophistication exposed something that is very contrary to the narrative that Facebook is trying to create. They keep saying that they're trying to reform themselves and improve their public image, and most people think that paying teenagers for access to their data is really pretty dodgy.
And they didn't tell them until they didn't identify themselves as Facebook, apparently.
Yeah, I think they would say, well, we didn't not tell them. They identified themselves in a sort of vague way, and there's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo that
clicking, you agree,
clicked through it, and most people probably who signed up for the program thought, oh, whatever, I'm just getting $20 to use this thing. What do I care?
Right.
Have Mark Zuckerberg and Bernie Madoff ever been photographed together? That's my question.
Jennifer.
So I have a rave for Kyle Smith, who is the media critic at National Review, for writing, I think, a very interesting piece raising questions about the curious case of Jussie Smollett and pointing out that a lot of aspects of the story are bizarre, don't make sense, and that the police have yet to identify on the tape that this ever happened at all, and that they have been unable to prove whether this event happened in the way that Jussie Smollett said it did. And I think it's such a horrible event that if true, nobody wants to be in a position of questioning it because it's awful. But I think that journalists are in the business of skepticism, and when things don't add up, kudos to Kyle Smith for raising
And there was
questions.
another one, as I recall, somebody in Chicago. Somebody else was responding to the story and said, not so fast, this hasn't been verified. There was somebody...
a local Chicago, I believe, television reporter has raised some interesting questions as well. So we'll see. We'll see how it turns out.
Because he went home, he still had the rope around his neck, and it was like the whole thing.
I wonder if that story had happened here, what the local media's response would have been. My sense is that ever since Charles Stewart jumped off that bridge, people hold their water on any fantastic story about a crime until there's some actual verification.
I don't know.
Right, particularly where he didn't call 911.
All right, so I have a rave in general. I mean, a rant in general about the media's fixation on wind chill. I'm not saying it isn't real. It's real. It's what, but it's not, doesn't replace what the real temperature is. So this week I was watching ABC. I usually try to catch one of their broadcasts. They focused, look at this map, strictly on the wind chill. Nowhere's on that map does it tell you what the temperature is, but what it feels like. And people were equating it. They were saying, oh, it's going to be 58 below in Bismarck, whatever, but it wasn't. Unlike what the Boston Globe did, which I have to say, I give them credit, they gave you the temperatures and the wind chill. You want to be able to have some kind of a comparison. And they did that very well. I thank you very much.
I think wind chill comes up when it tends to be really cold out, and people want to over-dramatize how cold it is.
People, the media does.
Yeah, well, people, but also like regular people. You hear people saying like, oh, it's basically 40 below outside.
Like,
no, it's not.
No,
but, I mean, we all live here. I think it's dramatic enough when it's 2 degrees out.
Exactly.